the questions about applications and online mooring and their statuses. So I thought what I'd do is to go through the complete life cycle of an application and online mooring, showing all of the possible workflows that you could use in order to manage these applications to your needs. To go through this, I first want to point out a good help page that describes everything that will be included in this demonstration and training session. If you go to the help button on any page, you can click the button to get help. I'm going to right-click on that and open the help in another tab. The help page you can get to by clicking on the index and then clicking on the application lifecycle page. I'm going to focus on this diagram and explain this a little bit. First thing I want to mention is that every one of our providers, and when I say provider, I mean our government agencies that issue permits, or our marinas that rent slips, or our yacht clubs that manage members, all of them have a different process for how they manage the requests that come in from the public or from their members. This high-level diagram shows the different phases of the application that it might go through during its lifetime. Many of our providers have wait lists, and if they do, then the way this whole process starts is by an applicant coming in and submitting an application to get onto the wait list. Once they've filled out that application, then the application goes to the provider, you, and as part of the waitlist management process, you can decide whether to add people to the waitlist or not. You can decide how long to put them on the waitlist for, and many of our providers often have an annual renewal process to stay on the waitlist. And if that's the case for you, then what you do at some point is you indicate as part of this management process when people need to submit their renewals. And when it's time, then the applicant has the opportunity to submit their waitlist renewal application and to pay whatever fees are associated with that. And when they're done doing that, then the application comes back to you in this waitlist management process, and you can decide whether to accept that renewal application and to extend their period on the waitlist or not. And you can go through this circle, renewing people for as long as is needed. At some point, however, hopefully, the applicant will have an opportunity to get assigned to some resource that you have, such as a mooring or a slip. And at that time, you have two choices. One choice is for you to directly place them, or to assign them to a berth and put them into this berth management process where you're controlling where they can be and when. But many of our clients, our providers, actually at this point, before they assign a berth to the person who's on the wait list, they often require that the applicant submit another application with additional information. And a typical example for this would be that during the wait list process, since some of the wait lists are so long for some of our clients, sometimes people don't have their boats yet at the time that they're getting onto the wait list. They just know that, all right, I want to get on the wait list, and once I have a mooring, I'll buy my boat. So oftentimes the information required about a vessel on the waitlist application is pretty minimal. But when it's time to assign the berth, our providers often want to know, okay, what is the actual boat that's going to be assigned to this mooring or slip or whatever the case may be. And this application process here is what allows the provider to gather that information from the applicant. And once they've filled that out and paid any fees that need to be paid, then they come back here to this berth management process where you then decide whether to accept their application and how long to assign them, but where to assign them, and also how long they'll be assigned there. Typically, there's always an end date as to when the boaters are allowed to be at that berth. And most of our providers at that point require that the applicant submit some sort of information about, to confirm all of their information is current and to pay additional fees. That's this renewal process. And when the applicant is done with that, comes back to the provider, and once again you can decide whether to accept, and then where to place them and how long to place them there for. And you can go through this loop for as long as you need. Each of these boxes that are shown here have more detail behind them. Each of these involves multiple statuses that can occur, and there are different actions that you can take on the application to change the status. If you want to get more detailed flowcharts or diagrams and descriptions of each of these boxes, there are help pages for each of them. For example, if we wanted to look at the process for any of these blue boxes, we can click on this application process, because all of these four different application processes behave very, very similarly. So if I click on the application process link, it will bring me to a help page that shows me a flowchart. I'm not going to go through the flowchart here, but it also provides a good description of the flowchart and all the steps that are involved. When you're done with the application, I'm also going to click on a link to show the flowchart for the waitlist process. The waitlist process, frankly, is the most involved process that we have, because there are a lot of different options and steps. But there's the diagram, and once again, there's a description below of all the different steps in that diagram. And during this training session today, I'm going to go through the most common statuses and flows, but you can always come here to get a more detailed description of those detailed steps. All right, so enough of the help. At this point, I'm going to go back and show you how this all works. I think the easiest way to show this life cycle is to show you two different views of online mooring side by side. The first view I'm going to show you is what the applicant sees as they go through this entire life cycle. The second view is going to be what you see as applicants are doing their work. So I've set up a training site that is configured to allow people to submit applications for mooring permits. Whether it's a mooring permit or something else, the process is the same. But I'll initiate this. The only thing that this applicant can do at this point is to apply for a mooring permit. And since there's a wait list for the mooring permits, I'll be submitting a wait list application. So I hit the apply button. It asks me if I really want to create a new application as opposed to updating an existing one. And then it takes me through the wizard. Each of our providers can configure this application process so that it looks different than what you're going to see here. Each applicant can, or each provider can decide which fields are going to be visible on the screen, which ones are required, how they're labeled. So, so as you see this, if you see that it's different from what you would expect for your harbor, that's okay. Just bear in mind that yours will be different. On this particular page, there's nothing that's required, so I'm just going to save and continue. It asks what wait lists I want to be on. I've set up 3 wait lists for training purposes, and I'll select 2 of them. I'll point out that there is this priority field where you can allow applicants to decide which wait lists they'd rather be on, or rather be assigned to, or which harbors, essentially. But you don't have to allow that, and as a result, this field can be hidden if you want it to be hidden. If you require any supporting documents from the applicant during this application process, the applicant has the option to upload those documents electronically or to submit them in paper form. In this case, for training purposes, I won't upload any documents. And then you get to the end, and it gives you a summary of everything that you've done. It shows you how much money you're going to owe to submit this application. You have the option of paying online using Google Checkout or offline by paper. If you want, you can actually disable some of these options. It shows what documents you need to provide that you haven't provided electronically, which will need to be provided by mail or in person. It shows whatever terms and conditions you have configured and requires the user to accept them, and provides mailing instructions for mailing this out to the user. So before I hit the Save button on this page, I want to go and show what you as a provider would see at this point in time. I'm going to go to the dashboard, and rather than just clicking on that link, I'm going to right-click and click the option to open that in a new tab. That way I'll be able to go back and forth between these two views of the database. So at this point in time, before the user clicks that Save button on that last page, the status of this application is that there's a waitlist application that's incomplete, as you would expect. Now I'm going to go, and also notice that the application didn't appear on any waitlist. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click the Save button on this application. So clicking the Save button has the effect of adding an action to the application called waitlist application submitted. And because I have hit the Save button and chosen the option to pay online, I'm taken to Google Checkout. So before I pay anything, let me just go back over to the dashboard so you can see what a provider would see at this point in time. I'm going to refresh the page. And what you'll see now is that the status of the application has changed so that it now says waitlist application under review. Whenever you see a status that says under review, it means it's something that you need to look at to review or approve. Notice that it says that even though I, as the applicant, haven't yet paid online. The reason is that the payment can always happen at a later time. An applicant can choose to pay by mail, by check, in which case the payment could come days later. So what that under review status really means is that the applicant has completed entering all of the information that they're going to enter online. There's also a way, if you get the application coming in paper form, you can also add that same action to indicate that you've received the application. I'm going to open actually a third view here so that we can take a look at this actual application from the provider perspective. You can see that here's the application summary page, shows all the information that I as an applicant had filled in, shows what waitlists they had selected, and also shows what actions have been performed so far on this application. So we can see that when they started out, this allowed action was added automatically. When they finished and hit save on that last page, the submitted action was submitted automatically. And now it's time for you to review and decide whether to approve or reject this application. In the real world, I would probably not approve or reject this application because the money hasn't come in yet, and I'd probably wait for the money to come in paper form. And if it hadn't come in a certain period of time, I might send a reminder to the applicant saying that we haven't received payment. If the applicant said that they weren't going to mail in the money, then you can hit the reject button to reject this. But let's say that the applicant did pay, and then in that case, you could hit the approve button, the thumbs up, and by doing that, that adds an action to the application, changes the status of the application to waitlisted. You can see that a third action was added here to the action section, indicating that it was approved. If I go back to the dashboard and if I refresh the page, you notice that not only has the status changed, but now all of a sudden that application now appears on two waitlists, the ones that the applicant had selected. If I go back to the applicant view of the world, I'm going to get out of Google Checkout by hitting the back button. I'm not going to pay during this training session. I'll go back to the home page. On my home page, we can see that now it shows that the status is waitlisted. It shows that I still owe the $15, which I can pay by hitting the pay button. And I can view, and if I wanted to, I can say I no longer want to be on the wait list. So I can hit the cancel button, and that'll put me into a cancel status, and I'll be automatically removed from the wait list. Nothing for you to do as a provider. So let's say that now you want to allow the applicant to submit a renewal to stay on the wait list. In some manner, you need to add an action to each application that needs to be reviewed. I'm going to show you here how to do it for a single application, but there is also a way to do it in bulk so that you can, for example, if you have 100 people on the wait list, you can all at once add this, update all 100 applications so that all of them can renew. When you do that, behind the scenes, what it's doing is adding an action to every one of those 100 applications. So the action that we want to do here is we want to allow the applicant to submit a waitlist renewal. And when I do that, I'm going to save that, and that should change the status now to waitlist renewal incomplete. So if I go to the dashboard and if I hit the refresh button, I want to point out that the status changed, but the application stayed on the wait list, and it's going to stay on the wait list until the end of your renewal period or until you reject an application. Going to the applicant view of the world, I'm going to refresh the page. You can see that now the status has changed to incomplete, and another thing that's changed is that now I have a renew button. So I hit the renew button, and it shows me all the information that I had before. I'm going to go through and fill out the information. Maybe I'll fill out some more information. Yeah, I know it's going to be a sailboat, and it's a Beneteau. Now I want to stay on the wait lists for both harbors. I'm not going to update any information electronically for supporting documents. And now I get to the last page again of my renewal. And one thing I want to point out is that when we show the fees, not only are we showing the fee for the renewal, which in this case is $15, but Online Mooring also knows that this applicant, me, hadn't paid the $15 from the last go around. So it basically tries to collect all the money that's owed, and this will become important. So we need to make sure that the records are accurate as to what people have paid. Otherwise, Online Mooring will try to collect those fees. So this time I'm going to choose to pay by check. I'm going to accept the terms and conditions. I'm going to save and continue. And when I do that, the status will change to say that the waitlist renewal is under review. If I go to the dashboard, I'll see the same thing. I'll refresh. They're still on the waitlist. The status has changed to under review. And if I go to look at the application and refresh the page, then I will now see that there's a new action down there that a waitlist renewal is submitted. Once again, since the status of this application is under review, it's up to you to accept or reject it. In this case, I'll approve it again. And when I approve it, that will add a waitlist renewal approved action, which will change the status to waitlisted again. So there are all the actions that have now been added. If I go to the dashboard, the only thing that changed is that status went back to waitlisted. And from the voter's perspective or applicant's perspective, now it shows that they're waitlisted. Okay, so let's say that now you're ready to take someone off the wait list and assign them to some berth in your harbor, and that you want them to provide additional information to you before you assign them to that berth. What you want to do at that point is to add another action, either individually to one application or in bulk, saying that you're going to allow them to submit the application to get a berth. Save that, and that will change the status to application incomplete. Go to the dashboard, refresh that, the application incomplete status shows up, and I want to point out that the person still stays on the wait list. You haven't taken them off of the wait list yet. And now, as an applicant, I'm going to refresh the page, and now I'll see that the status has changed, and now there is an apply button that I can click, and I can go through this, and the information that's going to be required now is going to be different than it was before, because we can configure the applications to be different at different phases in the process. And yeah, my boat name is Blazing Star, and my reg number is that. I've got 34 foot, 10.6. All right, save and continue. In this case, we give the applicant the option to stay on the wait list or not. So they could say, well, I no longer want to be in Harbor Wi-Fi. And maybe you ask people to provide some information if they're installing the mooring themselves. If you have moorings already and you're assigning them to them, then you wouldn't have people fill this out. So mooring 1, 2, 3, and I'll say that's an active mooring. And I won't enter the inspection information at this point. I'm not going to enter or upload any electronic documents. And I get to my last page, and once again, the amount of money due keeps getting accumulated. I'm going to pay by check, or at least I say I'm going to. Accept the terms, hit save and continue. And at this point, now the application has changed to application under review. So if I go to the dashboard and I hit the refresh button, status changed because the applicant took themselves off a wait list. They're no longer there. If I go to the application itself and refresh, you'll see that the application submitted action is now there. And once again, you can approve or reject. If you approve, what's going to happen is it'll automatically add an application approved action, which will change the status to approved. One thing I want to point out is that even though I've approved this application, once again, this person is still on the wait list for Harbor Y. If I went over to the dashboard and I refresh the page, they're still there. We don't take people off of the wait list automatically because providers may allow applicants to stay on a wait list for a different harbor than the one they've been assigned to. If you are one of those providers that doesn't want to do that, and you just want to automatically, or you just want to remove everyone from the wait list, what you need to do is to come in here and to deselect them from all wait lists and save. That's the only way to remove people from the wait list. So at this point, this person's been assigned a mooring permit. If I went to the dashboard and I refreshed, you'd see that they're no longer on the wait list. So I deselected the wait list page. If I refresh the home page for the applicant, it now shows that they're approved. And all is good. So let's say now that we get to the end of the the year and it's time for the applicant to renew. Once again, you as a provider need to come in and allow them to renew and let them know when they can renew. So in this case, the renewal allowed action is the one that you want. And I haven't mentioned it, but you can always enter in the time frame when the renewal is going to be allowed. Most providers that we work with have renewal periods from January to March of each year, and we can configure it so that those dates appear automatically. But you can also override it and type whatever you want. So I'm going to allow the renewal. That changes the status to renewal incomplete. If I go back to the dashboard, the status just changed. Also, I want to, if I refresh the home page for the user, now that renew button becomes available, and now I can go through the renewal process, and I can go through each of these pages, and if nothing's changed, I can just review it and hit save. And when I get to the end, it's still trying to collect all these fees from me. And I'm going to accept the terms and conditions, hit save, and once again, status will change to renewal under review. And then if I go to the dashboard, you can see that same status, renewal under review. If I now go into I'm going to refresh the application page. If I come here, you'll see that that renewal has been submitted. If I approve it, then the status will go back to approved. And now you can see we've gone through the whole process. So we've gone through 4 cycles. You might hear these cycles referred to in our help as situations. So we've gone through the waitlist application cycle. We've gone through a waitlist renewal cycle. We've gone through an application cycle. We've gone through a renewal cycle. So we've basically gone through 4 cycles in the space of less than half an hour. So if we go back to the dashboard page, we'll see that we're back to approved. I want to point out that now this little gauge shows that of all the moorings that we have in our database, 100% of them have been assigned to people, in this case to me. And if we go back to the voting page, we can see, if we refresh the page, that we've gone back to a status of approved. It still shows the money that's owed. And that should give you a good summary of the application lifecycle.